Hey, good afternoon. Welcome back to the Naked Conch Hour. We're discussing some inventory issues in the county. We're discussing accuracy in journalism, and one of the reasons I'm going through such detail and such specifics is because I've been accused of being factless, and my story was without foundation. And I'm trying to explain for the viewers why I feel that's not an accurate statement, and I think I was trying to follow everything appropriately, and I think the walls were going up at this point. So while my response, again, that was Ms. Vandenbroek responded to me on March 15th. I responded that same day, and I said, well, I find that I think that's way too much. I'm not going to spend that money. I think it's actually an outrageous insult to the taxpayers who own those documents. But then I said, let me see if I can simplify my request to avoid the costs you established. I said, how much would it cost for a copy of the last 3 years of the inventory records that your office may have? Pretty specific. Also, maybe just as a courtesy, for the column I'm writing in Conch Life, you or Mr. Eadie could answer a simple question. What happened to the tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment described by Andrew Bula in an email dated July 19th? And that was on March 15th. March 16th, Mr. Eadie replies to me, for you to assert that this agency seems to have misplaced tens of thousands of dollars of public property is irresponsible and unfair to the staff of the Monroe County Health Department. Your accusations have no basis in fact. The items subjected to Mr. Hedman's email to Mr. Bula amounted to 22 in total, and each one is accounted for. And how he says it's accounted for, which ultimately he gave an attachment of, again, the famed deletion request forms, and it was basically $29,000 worth of equipment. A lot of it new. I hate to say it, and I've explained in other emails. I'm not going through everything, all the exchanges I had with him, but it was over $10,000 of what I view to be good and decent equipment at that point. Now, this is the next year, okay? The year before it was $227,000, which I gave him the fact that it was obsolete equipment, but now here's the very next year, and here's another $29,000, which he's freely admitting to. I then responded, and he gave me that document, the deletion request forms, to say that's how he accounted for it. Okay, so that's fine. I guess you can just do it after the fact once it's found to be missing. My understanding is, but I've never lost a piece of equipment, is if you do lose a piece of equipment, a police report should be filed, and I believe you can actually get insurance to cover it. But I'm not actually 100% sure because I've actually never lost a piece of equipment, but happens a little bit here at the health department. So, I'm trying to be polite, but at this point, he's calling me irresponsible for suggesting this, and it's totally based in fact. So I gave him a copy of the public records request. I said, of the statutes regarding public records, I said 119.01, providing access to public records is the duty of each agency, and definitions, actual cost of duplication means the cost of material and supplies used to duplicate the public record, but does not include labor costs or overhead costs associated with such duplication. So see, some labor cost is within reason. The only thing is when it becomes extensive. And I then gave him what I got from the clerk's office, of which I referenced the clerk gave me free of charge to that public records request. Kudos to them. And I referenced the fact that no, you actually say in this public records request a letter. You admit to losing tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment, albeit obsolete. Here's another thing from Mr. Bula that says MC tagged assets have not been found. And there's a questionable statement from Ms. Vandenbroek that says one suggestion, add the present value or close to zero or close to it. And I said, that's why I want that email exchange. And I also expressed, I understand the challenges that go along with keeping track of inventories, especially in an agency as large as yours. However, I don't think he should characterize my inquiries as extensive. Now, or irresponsible or unfair, I should say. He responds on March 20th, I can appreciate your point of view, but along those lines, do you want to continue with your original public records request? Well, of course I replied, I do not want to pursue the public records request if your agency insists on charging me over $400. However, it would be nice to view the entire email conversation that is partially copied in the public records request from the clerk. So I've kind of changed it now. We're having a little, don't give me the whole thing, but if you give me that one email exchange so I can understand what Mary Vandenbroek's talking about and why that one page from the clerk's office was kind of weird. I'd also be nice to review any policy you implemented as a result of your letter of 2009, the letter where he explained losing the $227,000. or accounting for the missing $227,000 worth of equipment. And I said, if you could respond in writing with an answer regarding what is represented by the inventory listed on pages 14 and 15 of the clerk's public records request that has the heading Need Destruction Form would be helpful. What happened to those specific items? The reason I prefer documents and written responses is so that I can be as factual as possible, and so that I won't run the risk of misquoting you or misrepresenting a verbal response. So yeah, he can say, give me a call, let's talk about this, but that's why I'm asking for these documents or asking for a written response. I'm trying to be as factual as possible and trying not to misquote him or misrepresent anything he says. So then my article came out in Conch Life because he chose not to respond to any of that. He did not answer the questions ever about, I asked him how much would it cost for the 3 years of inventory. They never responded to that. He did kind of explain that of the tens of thousands the second time around, it was accounted for in the deletion request, but he never gave me the email, the one specific email. How much more specific could you get? So we move on. I write the article. And again, there was a week delay in the article. And just a few points I'd like to reference from the article. A few points from the article are, I said my questions centered around Mitch Hedman, the former county employee in charge of inventory. He filed a complaint with the state attorney's office in September 2011 suggesting he was being asked to resign after discovering $250,000 in missing inventory at the health department. Pretty accurate from the public records request that I got from the state attorney's office. I never said the health department has $250,000 in missing inventory in this article. I never said, although they did ultimately have a question of how they disposed of it, and where it ever really went wasn't proper. And I even said in this article, to be fair, most of the equipment seemed very old and worthless, and Eadie provided a document illustrating that a large quantity of equipment had been recycled the year before. Regardless, things should have been going good beforehand, and I raised the questions about the $29,000 that clearly was another problem. Mr. Eadie's response to my article was, to be perfectly clear and factual, since I have been an administrator, the Monroe County Health Department never has had missing assets in the amount of $250,000 or in any substantial amount whatsoever. Well, I've got the documents that even the year before, you just sent me an email that showed $30,000, $10,000 of which was very good. I guess that's not a substantial amount to you. As a taxpayer, it's a substantial amount to me. Your assertions to that effect, published in the March 22nd Conch Life, are false and without foundation. No, they're not. No, they're not, Mr. Eadie. And this is the question I have for the public viewing audience today is am I being antagonistic by asking these questions? Do I have a right to ask these questions, whether as a columnist or as a member of the public? And shouldn't Mr. Eadie's first response be, hey, man, open doors. I want to be as transparent as possible. I want the public to know that our agency is integrity top to bottom here, folks. I want to make sure they know. I want to open the doors. Matt, come on in. Here's some more documentations. Here's the email exchange. No. He says he's invited me to come in and have a conversation with him. I invited him on the show because that way we'd have the public as a witness, or I asked him to respond in writing. Continuing on, he said, but here's the one piece of information that was very helpful. He said, there are no Monroe County Health Department assets listed on pages 14 and 15 of the documents you supplied. Now, you remember from that very first public records request from the clerk's office was a substantial amount of inventory. That would have been a really helpful thing to answer right away. He could have provided, this is after the article came out, he could have said, those aren't my assets. I asked him, could you explain what those assets are on pages 14 and 15? So now he answers that question. Still doesn't mean that all the other assets we've talked about henceforth on this show weren't exactly what I said. I was just asking questions for what appeared to be even more beyond what I total as $257,000 of inventory. But he says, those aren't mine. So of course that makes other questions for me, which we'll get to at the end of the show. But then he says, are you aware that on August 5th, 2010, Mr. Hedman sent Mr. Bula an email showing the health department is among the leaders of reconciling inventory this year? No, I'm not, and you didn't provide me that email, so I'm still not really aware of that. And then in a follow-up telephone conversation, Mr. Hedman commended Mr. Bula for his efforts regarding the annual inventory audit and said the department had done an awesome job. Well, no, I'm not really aware of a telephone call that occurred between two individuals that neither of us have a recording of. So that's what Mr. Eadie wants to back his show on fact. Mine are based on documents, questions, items given me by the clerk's office. Come on back to the Naked Conch Hour after the break.